I'm Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has stated that Israel has agreed to the initial withdrawal line and that Hamas's agreement will trigger an immediate ceasefire and pave the path to the return of the hostages and prisoners by both sides. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that the demilitarization of Gaza will happen either by Trump's plan or by Israel's military. This comes after he agreed to the initial withdrawal proposal made by Trump. The activists detained by Israel from the global Sumud flotilla, who have now been released, have alleged severe mistreatment in Israeli custody, particularly with Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who the activists claim was dragged and abused by Israeli police. Syria is holding its first parliamentary elections 10 months after rebel groups led by Ahmed al-Shara, the current president, overthrew Bashar al-Assad to end the civil war. The election is not being held across the entire country, with provinces like Sweda, Raqqa and Hasaka excluded due to recent unrest. Billionaire Andrej Babis's populist ANO party has taken a commanding lead in the Czech Republic's parliamentary election, but is on track to fall short of a majority. With ballots from more than 97% of polling stations counted, ANO had 35% of the vote. Typhoon Matmo is strengthening ahead of its landfall in China, prompting the government to evacuate 150,000 people from southern Guangdong province. The storm had maximum sustained wind speeds of 151 kilometers per hour, according to China's National Meteorological Center. It is expected to make landfall around midday. All right, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump has announced that Israel has agreed to the withdrawal lines proposed and the phased plan for IDF's retreat from Gaza, urging Hamas to agree to follow his 20-point plan in order to trigger an immediate ceasefire. This comes as Hamas leadership has stated that no plan for disarmament will be acted upon until Israeli forces withdraw from Gaza, and that there are 2 to 3 points of contention in Trump's 20-point plan. Now, taking to his social media platform Truth Social, President Trump has announced that Israel has agreed to the initial withdrawal line and that a ceasefire will be immediately effective upon Hamas leadership's assent to the plan. This will in turn trigger hostage and prisoner exchanges, following which the next phase of Trump's plan will be put into effect. All right, more news coming in. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, meanwhile, has raised hopes that in the coming days he will be able to announce the return of all Israeli hostages, dead or alive. The Israeli Prime Minister has also instructed the Israeli negotiation team to finalize the technical details of the hostage release as negotiations are underway in Egypt. Now, all of this is coming as PM Netanyahu's domestic allies raise concerns about the negotiations, with Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich posting a strong statement on his social media platform stating that the decision to halt the offensive in Gaza and to conduct negotiations with Hamas is quote-unquote a grave mistake and a sure recipe for Hamas stalling for time. Listen in to what Netanyahu had to say.
אנחנו על סף הישג גדול מאוד. זה עדיין לא סופי. אנחנו עובדים על כך במרץ, ואני מקווה בעזרת השם שבימים הקרובים, עוד במהלך חג הסוכות, אוכל לבשר לכם על השבת כל חטופינו, החיים והחללים כאחד, בפעימה אחת, כשצה"ל נשאר בעומק הרצועה ובשטחים השולטים בה. אני הנחיתי את צוות המשא ומתן בראשות השר דרמר לצאת למצרים כדי לסגור את הפרטים הטכניים של שחרור חטופינו. הכוונה שלנו והכוונה של ידידינו האמריקנים היא לתחום את המשא ומתן הזה בימים בודדים.
With us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, International Affairs expert, joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, after Donald Trump's ultimatum, Hamas has expressed its willingness to release all Israeli hostages. In fact, negotiations to discuss the details, they'll be taking place in Cairo with the involvement of the U.S. Special Envoy. How do you view the statement that has come out and the fact that negotiations are going to commence very soon? Is this a genuine breakthrough or a tactical move by Hamas?
Yeah, it is a genuine breakthrough because of two principal reasons. One is the bombing of Gaza has ceased. Netanyahu requested the IDF and there is no more active fighting in Gaza. Second is, of course, Egypt is preparing to host the next meeting with the US mediators and Hamas, and the Israeli delegation is about to arrive in Cairo to move forward. So these two are very, very significant steps. And as you rightly said, Trump has posted in his social media the next move forward, which is the release of all hostages, living and deceased, from Gaza by Hamas, and that should take place within 72 hours. And thereafter, there will be extensive negotiations on how peace can be restored in Gaza. But the very first step is focused on the release of those living and deceased hostages.
Absolutely, sir. I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking more updates regarding what's happening in the Middle East. Now, Israeli citizens have taken to the streets of Tel Aviv in thousands, demanding an end to the war and urging the return of all hostages. In fact, some Israeli protesters expressed worry about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, stating that he could sabotage the deal as he did before. But they've meanwhile also expressed hope that this time the deal will pass. Take a look.
Days, the negotiation saboteurs are organizing to pressure Netanyahu. We must stand firm as a wall against them. We must not abandon the negotiation arena to sabotage. We must not miss this opportunity.
We are very hopeful that Trump will be able to coerce Bibi into submitting and agreeing to this agreement and not to torpedo it as he has done in the past time and time again. We believe in the initiative for peace in the region, not just for the end of this war. And we do believe in Trump's leadership, and that right now he has come to a decision that this is the end of these atrocities that are still happening both here in Israel and in the war in Gaza.
Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Gunaratne. Now, sir, what's interesting is that in its statement, Hamas has not agreed to disarm. Now, in this context, what are the risks if the ceasefire is in place and Hamas retains even part of its stockpile, the weapon stockpile or tunnel infrastructure?
As you mentioned, Pia, there are three phases. One is the release of the hostages, second is the disarmament, and third is the demilitarization. So with regard to disarmament and demilitarization, Hamas has not committed itself. That is why they only agreed partially to the Trump deal. What is important is Netanyahu himself is committed to the release of the hostages. Of course, there's a radical far right in Israel that is calling for the continuity of IDF operations in Gaza to eliminate the Hamas and to dismantle the anti-Hamas infrastructure. But Netanyahu has taken this path, working with Donald Trump to ensure the release of the hostages. That phase has now been consolidated.
Indeed, but you know, at the same time, Hamas has come out and made it very clear that it will only consider disarmament if Israel withdraws completely, if demilitarization takes place. So in this situation, do you think that after the hostage prisoner exchange, there is a possibility for a deadlock to occur?
It is possible because IDF continues to dominate and control certain areas of the Gaza Strip. But I want to tell you that if there is a hostage release, certainly Israel will have to commit to the withdrawal from Gaza, provided there is a non-Hamas administration that will come into effect in Gaza. Israel's primary concern is its national security. After the release of the hostages, Israel will not maintain a presence in Gaza if their security concerns are met, meaning that Israel will be able to have an overview of the security of Gaza, and that can be done by having a non-Hamas administration.
Indeed, sir, since you've addressed this point regarding a non-Hamas administration, I will come to that very, very soon. But we're tracking some further updates, this time from Europe. We're now learning that hundreds of thousands of protesters have marched in Barcelona, Rome and Madrid as anti-Israel rallies are being conducted across Europe. The protests in almost every major Spanish city had been planned for weeks, while the protests in Rome followed widespread anger after the Israeli interception of the humanitarian aid flotilla that had set sail from Barcelona in a bid to break the blockade of the Palestinian territory. Now, Hamas has stated that it has accepted some elements of the plan laid out by Donald Trump. But of course, there are larger humanitarian concerns that even the United Nations has pointed out, highlighting the fact that there's a famine that is currently taking place in Gaza. People are starving. The death toll too has crossed 65,000. Now, Rome's police has stated that 250,000 people turned out on the streets, while organizers stated that 1 million attended for a second straight day of demonstrations in Italy. Remember, viewers, Italy has already seen more than 2 million people rally in a one-day general strike to support the Palestinians in Gaza. Meanwhile, in Spain, 100,000 people marched in Madrid and other 70,000 filled downtown Barcelona. Organizers of the Madrid march raised the attendance to 400,000, while in Barcelona there were 300,000 who are pegged to have taken part in these protests. Meanwhile, in London, nearly 500 people have been arrested during protests in support of action in Palestine. Demonstrations had taken place in Trafalgar Square.
There's this peace plan that we're meant to give blind faith to, and there's been a global Sumud flotilla, which was where 350 odd people were kidnapped and are now imprisoned in Israel, and they're undergoing the kind of treatment, getting a small taste for us, people like me, of what Palestinians have been put through in Gaza for not just 2 years, not just a decade, but since 1948.
Lo lamentable, sobre todo, es el papel de los gobiernos, incluso el gobierno español, que manda un barco para proteger y luego se retira. ¿Para qué coño va? No lo sé. Va, pues seguramente, como dentro de X años o X tiempo hay elecciones, habrá gente que le compre el mensaje y demás. Es una auténtica vergüenza.
It's important because it's the same heart, the same motivation that drives people like me to oppose anti-Semitism, to oppose discrimination against anybody, to oppose the discrimination, destruction of the Palestinian people. So one and the same set of motives. I'm against all anti-Semitism, I'm against all discrimination, and I'm against the injustice towards the Palestinians, which has led on to an apartheid regime, which has then descended into the depravity of genocide towards the Palestinians.
Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratna. Sir, coming back to what you had pointed out earlier, you had stated that Hamas has agreed to hand over administrative powers in Gaza to a technocratic Palestinian body. However, only once national consensus is achieved. Now, at the same time, their statement has excluded any reference to the proposed board of peace that Trump, in fact, put out earlier in the 20-point plan that he is set to lead and that Tony Blair is set to be a part of. So, in your assessment, is this then an attempt by Hamas to retain control behind the scenes while avoiding external oversight?
Hamas has issued a statement that I have reviewed and now that is public, that they want to have a say in the national Palestinian framework, meaning they want to be a part of the governance process. This Netanyahu will not permit, this Trump will not permit, this no sensible government in the world will permit, because Hamas was behind the October 2023 terrorist attack that led to a devastating war. So any sensible government, any thinking leader will not permit Hamas participation. So this remains a very significant challenge that could even derail future negotiations. That is why it is so important for this peace process to continue with attention, with focus, and with foresight, so that there can be peace achieved in the Gaza Strip and for the Palestinian people.
Indeed, sir, and factoring in the 20-point plan, then in your assessment, what security framework would Israel consider sustainable in Gaza about a year from now, whether a buffer zone or an international force that was proposed?
As you said, Pia, they want to have an international security force, but if that force cannot be constituted, then of course IDF will maintain a very strong capability, in fact, within Gaza. So what is important is for there to be a force that is acceptable to Israel as well as for the Palestinians, and for Hamas not to play a role. Hamas is an extremist organization that is driven by its patrons and by its vicious ideology. So unless there is a greater understanding of Hamas wanting to maintain its relevance and also continue with its ideology, then there cannot be peace. One must understand, for there to be peace, both Israel, Hamas, and other terrorist groups that are also active in Gaza, such as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all these groups will have to work together. So there cannot be peace in the short term. It's a very long, structured peace process that will eventually bring peace in Gaza and in the Middle East.
Indeed, sir, I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some further updates from the Middle East. We're now learning that some 137 activists who were detained by Israel for taking part in the global Sumud Flotilla's aid initiative to Gaza have now arrived in Turkey after being deported from Israel. Now, according to reports, 36 Turkish nationals as well as citizens from the United States, United Arab Emirates, Italy, Kuwait, Switzerland and Jordan, among other countries, have landed at the Istanbul airport. Now, some of these activists have alleged that Swedish campaigner Greta Thunberg was mistreated by the Israeli forces during her detention. The activists have alleged that they were not provided with clean food or water and that their medication and other belongings were confiscated. Meanwhile, the Israeli Foreign Ministry had earlier said that the detained activists were safe and in good health. Listen in to what some of the deported activists have had to say.
She dragged her very intensely, and they even put the Israeli flag on her face, and they even put Greta on a trolley. They treated her like animals.
She was treated terribly. You know, I mean, she was they draped her in an Israeli flag and they just pushed and pulled her wherever they wanted and for whatever propaganda they wanted. I was 3 people in front of her in line, and she came close to this private room, and they just shoved her really aggressively and put her in the room, and then Ben Gvir arrives and goes into the room with her. And they were just, you know, it was awful, but they were trying to use her as propaganda for their optics, but she was just treated like a piece of trash, you know.
Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratna. Some allegations are now being leveled by the activists regarding mistreatment. What are the legal consequences for this? Do you think any state whose citizens have been part of the flotilla will move court against Israel?
The activists are very fortunate that they have been freed and they have arrived in Istanbul, in Turkey. What is important for the activists is not to again breach law, international law, by trying to enter a conflict zone. Gaza is a conflict zone, and they are very fortunate that Israel did not go beyond what they have done. Of course, if this flotilla went to Arab country, any other country in the Middle East, they would have been detained and kept in custody forever. So they are very fortunate that Israel has released all of them. And I think that they should spend their time more productively for peace and security. I was very disappointed that none of these activists in the flotilla spoke about the Hamas terrorist attack that caused this devastating war. And I was also very disappointed that none of them advocated for the release of hostage taking. I think that these activists should be educated step by step that hostage taking is criminalized, that it is an act of terrorism, act of crime, and they should spend their time more productively towards world peace and not be driven by the ideology of Hamas or by any other extreme organization. This war in Gaza was created by a terrorist incident, and everyone should ensure that peace is restored, stability is restored, and there is no more killing in the Middle East, either by terrorists or by governments.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to more developments. We're now learning that billionaire businessman Andrej Babis has won the parliamentary elections in the Czech Republic. Babis's populist ANO party has fallen short of an overall majority, and he stated that the party will seek to lead a one-party government and has called the results of the election as historic, despite the party earning under 35% of the vote in the lower house. Listen in to what he had to say.
A my určitě budeme jednat s SPD a s motoristy a budeme usilovat, jak jsme říkali, o jednobarevnou vládu, kterou by řídilo hnutí ANO. A střet zájmu, ano, samozřejmě, já jsem slíbil panu prezidentovi, když nastane ta chvíle, že za ním přijdu a ukážu mu to řešení, aby bylo v souladu s českými zákony a s evropskými zákony.
Babis has also said that he would talk to two small parties, including one far-right party, for support, as his own will lack an outright majority. His victory has raised the prospect of a Czech government that would reduce support for Ukraine. Now, speaking to his supporters, he has rejected accusations that his win would make the Czech Republic a less reliable European Union and NATO partner. ANO's deputy chairman, Karel Havlík, has also confirmed the party's commitment to EU and NATO membership. Listen in.
So definitely we are confirming that we will be the member of the European Union, of the NATO. It's for us the thin red line. And we are criticizing European Union, but on the other hand, we don't want to destroy European Union. We would like, let's say, the reform European Union. And NATO, of course, NATO is extremely important. We would like to strengthen the position of the NATO, including the United States of America.
Meanwhile, after losing the election, the current Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala has stated that he would continue to keep the Czech Republic a part of the West and he will not give up the fight against populism and extremism. Have a look.
Nevzdám boj o osud této země. Ať se nikdo netěší na to, že bych byl rezignovaný nebo unavený. Já jsem zvyklý na to celý svůj život mít třeba i menšinové názory, ale budu bojovat za to, aby tato země byla demokratická, svobodná, byla pevnou součástí Západu a budu za to bojovat i kvůli našim dětem a našim vnukům.
Shifting focus to what's taking place in Georgia, we're now learning that large-scale protests have erupted in Georgia during municipal elections, with thousands gathering in Tbilisi, accusing the ruling Georgian Dream Party of authoritarianism and leaning towards Russia. The demonstrations turned violent when some protesters tried to break into the presidential palace compound. Police has declared the rally as unlawful and responded with tear gas, pepper spray and water cannons. Officials say that more than 24 people, including police officials and demonstrators, were injured. The government insists that the elections were fair, claiming victory in every municipality. But with opposition leaders jailed and EU talks suspended, protesters now maintain that they will continue their fight for democracy and fresh elections. Listen in to what they had to say.
We are here for freedom of our country, for Euro integration, because we're the member of the Europe family. We're here for freedom of our political prisoners, and we demand Georgian Dream, so-called Georgian Dream, to leave us alone and go to their homeland, Russia.
That's expression of deep crisis, which is absolutely formed by our pro-Russian and authoritarian government, and that's what's happening now. And I think this protest will continue until these demands will be responded properly from our government. That's what's happening, and yes, that's absolutely democratic process which is happening in the streets, and it's absolutely non-democratic process which is happening in the institutions, in the parliaments, and in the electoral process, and anywhere, you know.
One of the main reasons why we've gathered here today is because we want to see that we're not alone in this, and we're trying to fight, well, now it's been a year, almost a year of non-stop protests every day.
Shifting focus to East Asia, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has stated that Pyongyang has allocated strategic assets to respond to the build-up of U.S. military forces in South Korea and has vowed to develop additional military measures. Kim has stated that in direct proportion to the build-up of U.S. forces in South Korea, the strategic interest in the region has also increased. And therefore, North Korea has accordingly allocated special assets to key targets of interest. He has stated that he believes that North Korea's enemies should be concerned about the direction their security environment is evolving in. He has added that North Korea will undoubtedly develop additional military measures in order to prepare and respond to the buildup of U.S. forces without elaborating any further. North Korea has been tightening military ties with Russia and has been supporting Russian President Vladimir Putin's war with Ukraine by sending troops and artillery. Kim has also been deepening ties with China and recently traveled to Beijing to attend a military parade marking the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War alongside Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He has also highlighted that North Korea will not in fact abandon its nuclearization quest in response to recent military drills that were held between South Korea, United States and Japan. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.